Hello everyone and welcome back to In the Introduction. This time we will be taking a look at Disciples' Liberation. Now before we start, there are two things I want to say. I know some people will say that Disciples shouldn't be in the Introduction, and I completely agree, it isn't an indie game. However, it also isn't from a AAA studio, so occasionally I will do these types of reviews. Of course, indie games will remain the focus of this series. And the second thing I want to mention is that I played the game on GTX 750. It may not run at 60 FPS, but for all of you out there that have low-spec PCs, Disciples' Liberation can run on 1GB GPU. So let's finally jump into Disciples' Liberation. In a world divided by war, where endless onslaught between four factions destroys innocent lives, and where even within the same faction rebels fight against their leaders, two mercenaries set out on a mission to unite Nevendar. The story of Disciples' Liberations follows Aviana and Orion, two mercenaries hired to take down the Empire's head priest. After confronting the priest, Aviana realizes that there is something really shady about him, and the priest, almost as if he expected her, calls in his guards who step out of the shadows and immediately surround her. Just when Aviana thought it is all over and that she is done for, a portal opens up, allowing the two mercenaries to escape. What they found on the other side of the portal was something they thought was only a fairy tale. In front of them was the long-lost city of Ilian. Aviana and Orion searched the city, only to find that it is empty. Since they are now officially enemies of the Empire, our two mercenaries have to decide which faction to ask for help, and find a way to bring the city of Ilian back to life. In the city, you can hire units, train them, build new faction-related buildings, build a market, and a blacksmith. You can also talk to your companions, learn new spells, respec your abilities, gather resources from the mines you have flagged. Although, to be honest, I'm not really sure why we have to do that manually. The city has everything you need to get ready for battle. After talking to our companion Orion, we can choose 4 locations to travel to, each associated with a certain faction. You don't have to worry too much about which faction to choose, just start with one that sounds most interesting to you, because you will have to clear all areas, so it isn't a big deal. Once we have teleported to our chosen destination, we can finally roam around the map and go on our adventure. We have the classic isometric view, and there are no turns or movement points while traveling. We are able to view the local map where we can see info. While exploring, we can stumble upon certain hostile groups roaming the area, resources that can be picked up, chests. There are also mines which will grant you passive income to certain resources. Sometimes you will run into an obstacle that you can't remove until you acquire a companion who has a world skill to remove them. There are of course quest givers, and speaking of quests, a lot of them have a couple of ways that can be solved. Sometimes you find out the quest giver wasn't as nice as he seemed at first, and you can decide to turn against him, or you can continue doing what he asked you to. Some NPCs can be persuaded to follow your orders, or you can fight them and change their opinion the hard way. There are a lot of dialogue options. You have responses like good, evil, telling a lie, and a new and very unpopular addition if you ask the old school Disciple fans, it is romance. Every choice you make in the dialogue can affect the future behavior of some NPCs and the story. Funny example that I had during the game, I lied to a guard and told him that some made-up character sent me, and later on in the game I meet a new NPC who was like, "Really? That's what you came up with?" The majority of dialogues have voice acting, so it really adds a nice touch. The community is a bit divided though whether the voice acting is good or not. I personally love the role-playing aspect of games, and just getting absorbed in the world that I'm playing in. So for example, when I see a big armored soldier that has battle scars and decades of experience, or a backstabbing rogue, I expect them to have a certain personality and behavior that one can expect from them. I'm not saying each warrior or mage or whatever should sound and behave the same, but I don't really expect them to be cracking jokes and being witty while undead are vomiting on the battlefield. The dialogue really does at times sound cheesy. Remember the Warcraft 3 Zeppelin that goes,
"I laugh in the face of danger!"
Now imagine every character is like that.
If you are determined to get past, let the High Father guide you. But the gates are not just guarded, they're blessed. Only a priestess's incantation could open them now.
But you know, this doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, because they chose their style, some like it, some don't, but they're sticking to it. And now onto the absolutely greatest part of the game, the combat. The battlefield is divided into hexagonal grids that show where the characters can move and where they can cast spells. There are 2 groups of units, the front line, and the back line. The back line consists of 3 units that can cast their passive ability, and you cannot control the back line. The front line are units that include our hero Aviana, companions, and hired mercenaries. In order to put units into the front line, you will have to have enough leadership points. Only mercenaries cost leadership points, while companions are free. However, you can only put 3 companions in total, both backline and frontline combined. Each unit in the frontline has 2 action points. There are 3 types of action points: blue, red, and yellow. Blue action point is only spent on movement, red action point is spent on abilities, while the yellow action point can be spent on both. The composition of your team is very important, and you want to have a nice combination of tanks, damage dealers, and healers, and a good backline to boost everyone. I use the backline that improves my defense, evasion, and that increases healing, making life easier for my healers. Positioning your units is really important, and not just in terms of putting your strong units in front, but also positioning so that your abilities can hit enemies. Sometimes you have to move your unit to get in range, or because certain abilities only shoot in a straight line. Aside from regular abilities, our hero also has mana points that can be spent on casting spells. And if you love casters, like I do, then you will have a lot of fun playing with spells in this game. If your composition is much stronger than your opponent's, and it's not a quest-related battle, you can choose the Conquer option, which just gives you an instant victory. And now we will cover the base stats. We have action points, which we've already talked about, HP and mana, pretty straightforward. We have power, which determines the damage and healing of a unit. Movement, which shows us how many tiles a unit can move. Initiative determines the order in which a unit acts, so the higher the initiative, the sooner you will play in a round. Leadership, we've also talked about this. This is only something that we have for Aviana. Crit chance and resistances. We have physical, divine, primal, and unholy resistance. We have 4 very important stats that affect the base stats. We have strength, increases physical and divine resistance, and also increases power if you're a mercenary, hexblade, or a warlord class. We have dexterity, improves initiative and crit chance. Constitution, which improves the unholy resistance and increases HP. And we have intelligence, which increases primal resistance, mana, and increases power if you're a mercenary, hexblade, seer, or a witch class. Stats can be improved by equipping weapons, armor, and shards. Only our hero can wear armor. Companions can equip a weapon or a shard, while regular units only have a shard. After we complete 2 zones, we can choose one of 4 classes in the game: Warlord, Hexblade, Seeress, and Witch. Warlord is a pretty standard melee class. Seeress is a strong caster that uses primal magic. Witch uses buffs and debuffs, and Hexblade uses both melee and spells. Every class you choose will change your playstyle. You will get new abilities, unlock certain types of armor, and it also changes the stats you gain while you level up. Aside from the campaign, there is also a multiplayer mode, so you can have fun with your friends. Overall, Disciples Liberation is a really fun game with amazing combat. If there's one thing that I think is missing, it is a custom scenario where we can choose a random class and faction and just have fun experimenting with everything, without the need to constantly respec like in the campaign. So that would wrap up our Disciples Liberation review. I hope you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, also consider following me on Twitch and Twitter, and I'll see you guys in the next video.